Okay, this is for pre-calculus, and I'm still working on what's my sine and cosine lab 1. And we're going to start doing graphs with horizontal shifts. We have been doing vertical shifts because that's what your midline is, but now we're going to actually go through and do all this. So I'm going to do the stuff that you know. I see that it's cosine, and I know that's going to look like, but if you'll see inside here, I have 2t plus pi over 2. So I need to know the frequency. The frequency is usually what's in front of your variable, but in this case, you always need to factor out. So I'm going to do cosine. I'm going to do a parenthesis here. I'm going to factor the 2 out of both of those. So I want you to think this as a half pi. So if I factor a 2 out, I get t plus, if I take a 2 or divide 2 out of 1/2, it's 1/4. So this is pi over 4. Okay, so if I multiplied it, I have 2t plus pi over 2. So this is important because this is your frequency. So right now my amplitude is 1 because there's a 1 in front. My frequency is 2, so I'm pretty good with that. You're like, okay, this is normal. I just had to factor that out. Now my period is 2 pi over my frequency, so it's going to be 2 pi over my frequency, or pi, so that's my period. My midline, there's nothing added or subtracted on the outside, so it's y equals 0. Okay, so now that is normal except for the factoring out. What I want you to do now is talk about phase shift and horizontal shift. Phase shift, you're going to look at your original, okay? So when I look at my original function right here, my phase shift is whatever this is. So I'm going to say my phase shift is negative pi over 2. Why negative? Because this is actually going to the left. Because remember, anything inside the parentheses is opposite. So this is actually, the phase shift is negative pi over 2. And you're like, what is the phase shift? Well, this is what a phase shift is. A phase shift is used in science where you want to know what portion of the curve was shifted over. So what you do is you take your phase shift divided by the curve of 2 pi. When I do that, the pi's cancel out. So basically, this is saying that 1/4 of my curve got shifted. That's good information to know. You don't need to do this every time. I just want to know you to know why you use it. So all you need to do is write that down. The horizontal shift is what we use to graph with. So this is important. That you have to do after it's factored. So I factored it. I have this pi over 4 now. So my horizontal shift is negative pi over 4. So this is what you're going to graph with, is that negative pi over 4. All right. So this is important. I'm not saying phase shift is it. I just wanted you to know what you use it for and why. Okay. So I'm going to go through and do what we always do. I've got my period is pi divided by my 4 quadrants. That's what I'm going to count by. I'm going to set up my little table here so that I know what to do. And this is a regular cosine curve. Okay, so I'm going to start and count by pi over 4. So I have 0, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4. So I always end up what my period is. And then because this is the middle is 0, it's going to start at 1 because my amplitude. It's going to come down to my midline, go lower down to -1, come back up to my midline, up to 1, so that I can graph it. Now, what I just did this table for was if I did not shift it. Okay, that's how I want you to do this. I want you to pretend you're not going to shift it and actually do the table, and then we're going to shift it by hand. But because this gets shifted to the left, I'm going to move my axis over so that I can actually do it. So y equals 0 is right smack in the middle. That's good. That's nice to know. But I'm going to move it over about 4 blocks, so because I'm going to shift it over to the left, and I need room to shift. So I'm going to graph this like I'm not shifting it, okay? So I'm going to go, let me see now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I have enough room. So I'm going to count by 4 like I always do. So I'm going to start at 0, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4. So there's pi. Okay, good. And I know it's going up 1 and down 1, so I'm going to have every 2 be 1. All right, so let's graph the original. Now, when I graph the original, I'm going to do it in yellow because this is not our curve, but we're going to graph it like we've been doing it. So I'm going to start at 0, 1, come down, pi over 4 is 0, pi over 2 is -1, okay? 3 pi over 4 is 0, and back up to 1. So this is the curve before I shifted it. I hope you can see it. It's kind of light. Now the real curve is what I'm going to draw now. All I need to do is kind of shift this to the left, pi over 4. So here's my negative pi over 4 because that's over. This is 0. So I'm going to shift it to the left. So all I'm going to take is all these points and shift them over. So this goes here. This goes here, right? This goes here. This goes here. This goes here. And I'm going to shift it. So ready? The red curve is actually the graph we want. So I do the original and then I shift it over using my horizontal shift. That's really important. So I hope that helps you for number 8. All right, I'm going to do a shift for number 9 as well. So let's do number 9. Here's number 9. You're like, oh, these are getting uglier. So first thing I'm going to do is write this as 1/4 of a t, and that's 1/4 pi if you want to think of it that way. And I'm going to factor out, because I have to have a frequency, I'm going to factor out 1/4. Oops, after I say cosine here. Cosine, parentheses, I'm going to factor out the 1/4. When I do, I have a t minus, and when I factor a fourth out of that, I just have a pi. Okay, so that's important. So this is what I'm going to be looking at for my phase shift and horizontal shift. So my phase shift on this one, since it's negative, it's going to go to the right, pi over 4, and just write it down. We're not going to do anything with it. This is the important part. The horizontal shift is going to shift to the right, pi, because it's a negative in there, so it's going to shift to the right, pi. Okay, that's important. Now we're going to go through and do everything else that we know here. The amplitude is 1, the frequency is 1/4. The period is going to be 2 pi over my frequency, 2 pi over my frequency, so that's 8 pi. My midline, there's nothing adding and subtracting on the outside, is y equals 0. So I want you to do all of this like you're going to do it without the shift, all right? So I'm going to take my 8 pi, divide it by my 4 quadrants. That's going to be 2 pi, and that's what I'm going to count by. So let's set this up, x and y. All right, so 0, 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi, 8 pi. Always end with my period. And because this is a cosine curve and the middle is 0, it's going to start at 1, go to 0, go to -1, back up to 0, back up to 1. So you should be getting used to this. Now, the only thing that's weird about this is I have to shift this one to the right. So normally I only count to 8 pi, but in this case I'm going to count to 9 pi because I have to go to the right. So I'm going to use y equals 0 is still our midline, so there it is. And I'm actually going to put this right on the, right on the edge here. Okay, a little wiggly. All right, and I'm only going up 1 and down 1, so that's easy. And I'm going to count by pi, so I'm going to do it every 2. So this is pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, because I got to get all the way up to 8, 4 pi, 5 pi, 6 pi, 7 pi, 8 pi. And you're like, okay, I'm done. But remember, I'm shifting over 1, so I'm going to go all the way up to 9 pi, because when I shift it, I got to shift it to the right. So if I'm going over pi, I'm going to actually end up at 9 pi. All right, so let's graph our, and I'm going to do it in yellow if I was going to do this. So this would be my one not shifted. So I'm going to do 0 at pi, undo that, at 2 pi. 0 at 2 pi, and at 4 pi it'd be -1. At 6 pi it'd be 0. At 8 pi it'd be 1. So here is the curve that I'm doing that is not shifted. I hope you can see it. Now I'm going to do the actual curve, and all I'm going to do is shift it over pi. So I'm going to copy this point here. So I hope I don't mess this up. Copy this point here, copy this point here, copy this point here, copy this point here. So I think I got it all. So here is my actual graph that has been shifted. So that's how you would do number 9. Now I'm going to do other videos for the last two, 10 and 11, because these take a little bit longer. So I hope this helped.